Good Monday morning. Help themselves to other people's stuff, basically. Is your microphone on? And that, by the way, is John Anthony.
The Chicago
There
way.
you go. Now your microphone's on. And just real quick, you have a show here on Saturdays
Yes.
from 1 to 3 p.m. called Black and Right.
Yes.
So-
Please join in.
Yes.
I'm having fun today.
Yeah, well, this has been a very busy day because we have a lot of news to get to. And as a concern for most of us is our kids. The kids seem to get lost in all of this, the children, because they are not doing well because they have nothing to do. Even if they wanted to get a job, there's really not a lot of jobs out there to get with 41 million people unemployed. And the number of kids that have called the child abuse hotline number has increased twofold.
Well, we believe that one of the biggest additional risks right now is kids not having access to the safety and security of schools, daycares, organized activities.
They're getting text messages from kids saying, my mom is beating me up. She's abusing me, my mom's boyfriend, because they lost their jobs. They're at home and they have to homeschool. And not everyone can be a teacher.
No.
Not everyone has that patience.
No.
And when we look forward to the fall, we don't know what fall is going to look like. And with that, we welcome our next guest. He's former CEO of CPS, Paul Vallas. He also was, he's got a long resume.
He does.
He's former superintendent of the Bridgeport Public Schools and the Recovery School District of Louisiana. And we also School District of Philadelphia and, of course, Chicago Public Schools, and the former budget director for the city of Chicago. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's start with when you took over the school district in Louisiana, in New Orleans, and kids that had been out of school for a year. What had happened to them, and what was it like when they went back after such a long time off?
Well, we found that students who were returning hadn't lost 1 year of instruction, but they were sometimes 3-4 years behind, because the brain really goes through kind of a mental atrophy. And of course, the less engagement at home and the less support at home, the students really suffer. In fact, there are studies that point out that just over the summer alone, students will generally lose about 20% of what they learned previous. But what we discovered with some children returning to school a year or even more after Katrina, they were far behind. So you really risk losing an entire generation of students unless you get schools open in some capacity, unless you engage these students. And of course, that doesn't even begin to talk about the social emotional problems, because, look, this quarantine, this is not shared sacrifice. While the quarantine is having an impact on everyone, the bottom line is it has a greater impact on those who can't work remotely, who can't learn remotely, who don't have the support at home. So it really is discriminatory against those individuals who obviously come from lower income families and the poor.
And then also, we just learned, CPS officials, they've been unable to reach 2,000 students during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Whoa.
Well, look, they need to be spending overtime to reconnect with all the students, no matter what it takes. They need to have the capacity to do that, even if it means sending personnel out to the schools, non-teaching personnel out to the schools to knock on the doors, so properly protected, et cetera, so that you can track down these students and get an assessment of where they are, what's happening to them. In fact, the entire summer needs to be geared up. I mean, you need to, the teacher's contract at this point is an irrelevant document because conditions have dramatically changed. And I'm not saying that you don't compensate teachers. What I'm saying is you can't get into the niceties of what's permitted under the contract and what's not. They need to reach out, connect with all these kids, do an assessment of what their needs are, get them engaged in some capacity over the summer while working to lay out the type of public health safety plan to reopen these schools and to train these teachers to improve their ability to provide remote instruction.
True.
I mean, the entire summer needs to be prepared doing these things because these schools have got to get reopened. They have to get reopened.
Hey, Paul, this is John. Now, it's not only just, physical abuse, sexual abuse, but the mental abuse and the number of suicides among these young kids they have nowhere to go, no outlets. How is that going to, how will they be able to do that, to deal with that when school starts back up? And did you have a plan? Is there any plans to deal with something like this come school opening?
Well, when I went out to New Orleans after Katrina, and let me point out that I didn't go to New Orleans until a year and a half after Katrina because they still had not opened the overwhelming vast majority of the schools. But the failure of the district during that period to essentially reach out and to re-engage those students, I think had a catastrophic impact, not only academically, but socially, emotionally. Yeah. What you've got to do is you've got to reconnect with the families now so that you can assess what the student needs are. I mean, there are programs, there are ways, there are programs that can connect to the families virtually. There are the type of social emotional supports that can be provided, even in a blended learning type environment. But what's important is to go out and to try to assess where the students are at academically as well as social emotionally, and then determine what type of supports you need to provide accordingly.
Yeah, I love what's going on in Manuka School District 201 where I live. Our superintendent, Chris Mon, he's really been ahead of this. I mean, we're getting emails every single day to keep tabs on our kids. It's just been exceptional, and I wish that was something that, just like policing. I wish we had something that everybody does. I know everything is different and all that, but certain things like this, dealing with mental health, sexual abuse, physical abuse, we have to have plans to make sure that these kids are protected. And I have 6 of those kids, so it really touches and is really near and dear to someone like me because, I mean, I hate to hear that. That's one of the reasons why I became a cop too, to protect kids.
Yeah. Well, we're just learning that the CPS has suspended grab-and-go meal sites and all over the whole city for today. So hopefully, I know a lot of people rely on that. So, Paul, let me ask you this. What are the chances that we are going to have in-person school come the fall?
Oh, boy.
Well, look, I would say the national leader of the American Federation of Teachers, Brandy Weingarten, wrote an op-ed in USA Today, basically saying schools have got to open, and they've got to open in some capacity. Look, young people are obviously less inclined to suffer the most negative effects from the virus, and so the children will be less at risk if you reopen schools, particularly if you have the type of school-based healthcare safety strategies in place that will allow you to create the safest, most secure environment. And what do I mean by that? For example, you can do temperature tracing at schools. They have kiosks and these thermal, almost metal detector walkthrough devices, so you can check a child's temperature. If a child has COVID-related symptoms, you can then quarantine that child, and then you can until you can get that child home. So you can check the teachers. If there are teachers who are over 50, who have pre-existing conditions, they can do more of their work at home as opposed to on site. But you've got to open the schools in some capacity, whether it's having flipped scheduling. Many districts are laying out social distancing strategies. There are masks that can be reused again and again so that the students have the appropriate masks. So there's steps that you can do. And what I've done, Amy, is I've posted on my LinkedIn a series of steps for reopening schools and a series of steps that people can follow in order to ensure that the schools have the health safety provisions and protocols in place to minimize the spread of the infection.
Okay, and what's the percentage of CPS teachers who are 50 and older? Do you know what this percentage is?
That's a good question.
Well, nationally, the percentage of teachers who are over 50 is 30%. So clearly, what you're going to see is widespread teacher retirements, particularly those teachers who are older. I think there was already a projected by, I think it was 2025, they were projecting 200,000 teacher shortages. I think there's only going to be a significant increase.
Wow.
But let me tell you what that also means is that the schools have got to have the flexibility to gear up to provide alternative teacher certification, because there's going to be a lot of college students right now, graduates, et cetera, that are not going to be having are not going to have the employment opportunities that they originally had thought they might have. So there's going to be plenty of individuals out there, as well as individuals, career changers, who might be willing to come in and to be trained online to become teachers to fill those gaps.
Yeah.
So you're going to obviously need to fill a lot of vacancies. But if there are older teachers, again, just as you can have mixed scheduling at the local school level, obviously teachers who are older, who have pre-existing conditions, it's a whole new day. You're going to have to reallocate responsibilities, and
Yeah.
just as you can learn from home, you could also, in effect, teach from home.
Hey, Paul, you used the term government and flexibility in one sentence. Wow, that's that's brave of you there. But speaking of government, how do you think the city officials are handling these riots? I mean, because they're still going on. We're watching the news right now. There's still fires and looting.
Look, let me just say this. I think these are unprecedented times, and certainly both the mayor and the governor came in and inherited conditions that were challenging even before the pandemic. And clearly, the pandemic has made everything worse. But I will tell you, they were not prepared. They were not prepared Saturday. They were a little better prepared Sunday. Don't believe me. Go to Windy City Cop and just look at all the things
Oh yeah.
that they failed to do, from raising the bridges to bringing out the trucks, the street and sanitation trucks, so they could limit the movement of the protesters, to not canceling, not calling everybody in, to being too concerned about overtime and staffing. At the end of the day, there was an absence of strategy, and I think the city suffered for it. And there's three factions at work. You have the people that are protesting clearly, and people have the right to demonstrate their concern, and people have the right for peaceful protest. But you have three factions there that I think were clearly bent on destruction. First of all, you have these groups that benefit when society is divided, and they've seen this tragic murder, this tragic killing. They've seen it as an excuse to go out there and to further divide the society,
Right.
the community. You also have the groups, particularly in the communities, who prey on people within the community, and it is to their interest, it's to their advantage to get the community not to trust the police officers and not to have confidence in the police officers. And then you have this third group that I call it the herd mentality, who just saw this as an opportunity to in effect steal, to in effect run with the pack and just vandalize stores, because you have to have been on the ground to see the damage. You don't even get a true sense of the
I
damage
know.
by watching TV.
You get nothing.
So
I drove around for an hour and 15 minutes last night, and my jaw was on the floor. I couldn't believe the damn. I mean, I stopped counting at 200, Paul.
Oh.
200 buildings that were boarded up or had been vandalized.
Yeah, it was just look. They should have anticipated this, because it was not like they weren't forewarned. There had been obviously riots and violent protests in other cities, and so they should have been geared up. And unfortunately, the thin blue line, the police officers were thrown into the fray, sometime in a very, very uncoordinated way. And don't take my word for it. All you have to do is to go to the police blogs, and they'll do a much better job than me articulating what was not done and what should have been done. Something as simply, you had a sense of where the people were going to move. So at the very least, cancel the trains, raise the drawbridges. Somebody made reference to in the movie Batman. Remember that Batman Returns? They filmed in Chicago. They raised all the drawbridges to kind of contain the area, if you remember. So at the end of the day, clearly there was not a strategy.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul Vallas, for joining us again today. And again, where can we find your information about how we can safely reopen schools?
Well, if they go to my LinkedIn page, I posted something on summer school, what they should be doing over the summer, as well as what the 10 basic components should be of reopening schools. And I've laid out in significant detail the steps to creating a school screening and school testing model. And hopefully that material will be helpful. And we've been posting it, and I've been circulating it through the Illinois Association of Regional Superintendents. And again, it's online on LinkedIn, and it's people are more than welcome to access it and use it to their benefit.
All right. Thank you, Paul Vallas, former
Paul.
superintendent for Bridgeport Public Schools, Recovery School District of Louisiana. The list goes on and on. Of course, he's my old boss because I used to be a substitute teacher. So thanks, boss. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Trading involves financial risk and is not suitable for all investors. Past results do not guarantee future performance.
Stock market have you nervous with all the massive fluctuations? With the impact of coronavirus and the upcoming election, it's virtually impossible to guess what will happen next. With Vantage Point, you don't have to. Text money to 411-411 to find out how our technology can forecast market trend changes with up to 87.4% accuracy. That's right, 87.4%. Text the word money to 411-411 to get what you need to stay ahead of market trends and better protect yourself from sudden downturns. Vantage Point's patented technology analyzes huge quantities of global data in seconds. No more guessing when to stay or when to get out. Text money to 411-411 and we'll send you a link to our free demo so you can better protect your hard-earned capital with Vantage Point. Don't wait. Text the word money to 411-411.
Go to VantagePointSoftware.com for terms, conditions, and privacy policy.
I got to go home and take my balance of nature. I do it every day. Why? Well, I have more energy. I sleep better at night, and I